I think the best way to do anything, not only in real estate, just anything, is just to jump in and figure it out as you go.
And so many people forget this. They think, well, I'm just starting out, I'm small, I don't have any advantages. That is not true at all.
I think what appeals to a lot of people getting into real estate, maybe self-storage, it's this passive income stream. And I think that once you actually achieve that, you don't want it.
Welcome everybody to Self-Storage Income. And I'm excited for today's guest. So we're jumping right into this. Derek, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Now you are, hold on here, let me get this right. You're in Michigan?
Yeah, in Michigan, kind of bittersweet. Just recently came back to Michigan after being 3 years in Florida.
All right. And you started investing in self-storage at what age?
I started in 2020. So that would have been about 33.
How many storage facilities you have? One more?
Right now we have 4 storage facilities.
And where are those located? What region?
All in Michigan, basically in rural communities is really where we've been focusing. So
awesome. Now, was this your first foray into investing? Like, did you just jump right into storage, or were you doing real estate? Like, I'm so curious because storage is always this thing where I'm like, how'd you get into it?
So basically I got into storage by accident. I've been in real estate, since I've been 18. The summer after I graduated high school, instead of just goofing around the entire summer, my stepmom paid for my real estate agent course to get my realtor license in Michigan. So while I was enrolled at Wayne State, I was selling houses for people. And then also, I commuted to Wayne State and would spend the gaps between classes, looking at these dilapidated houses in the inner city, in the city of Detroit, which, as you can imagine, was probably my parents' worst nightmare.
Yeah.
So if you're familiar with Detroit at all.
Yeah, I've heard stories.
So I kind of have a long real estate background, but I've done a little bit of everything. I flipped 3 houses before I was 19, made a ton of money, kind of figured college wasn't for me, and I was just going to flip houses forever, and it was never going to stop. I got to the 3rd house and lost everything I made on the first 2. And then from there, basically decided to go work for a property management company that's based in Ann Arbor, not too far from Detroit. I was there for probably about 3 or 4 years. And I always tell people that's where I got my backbone in property management and real estate. I learned, everything from the investing side of multifamily to, the operations. And from there, I went into a partnership with a company also based in Ann Arbor that we mostly focused on luxury single family house rentals in the Ann Arbor area. And I was kind of brought in to expand into the city of Detroit since that's where I had been. I was there for a couple of years and built, a nice third-party management portfolio of office space and warehouse, a little bit of retail. And then, after being there for 2 years, I kind of got engulfed into the arts community in the city of Detroit. And long story short, I spent about 7 or 8 years buying property just outside of downtown Detroit, dilapidated warehouses and retail buildings, and basically scraping together $5,000 at a time, buying them on land contract. The next thing was, after I had these buildings, it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do with them? I can't afford to renovate them. So the one building that I was managing was an arts incubator where we had 31 studios for artists and entrepreneurs. Building was about 26,000 square feet. The main floor had an art gallery. And it kind of just hit me one day when we were having like an art show in the building, talking with a street artist. Well, all these dilapidated buildings that I've bought over the past couple of years, why don't we start painting extravagant, crazy murals on them and bring some excitement to the area? So we did that for a couple of years, which actually ended up drawing a lot of investment and interest into the neighborhood. So again, we exited that project in about 2018. And since we've exited, it's kind of turned into like a little arts corridor for the city of Detroit. The original building that I was managing, I worked myself into a partnership on that building, kind of a sweat equity partnership, kind of, again, a long story, but the owner was in the middle of a divorce and bankruptcy. I went in and negotiated over a 2-year period a settlement with Chase Bank to buy it back or buy the note on the property for, I think, 50 cents on the dollar. And through that process, got myself into a kind of a sweat equity partnership. When I was in Detroit, I was also doing some fee management for apartments. So we were managing a few hundred apartments in some of the worst neighborhoods in Detroit. And I was basically on the clock 24/7 and got all those midnight phone calls and, really made me question if real estate was for me. But it's kind of one of those things that, whatever you do in real estate is never going to be easy, and you just kind of have to keep pushing forward. So fast forward to 2020, I actually purchased a house at auction in a small rural community in the Thumb in Michigan. No one bid on this house, and basically we went in there to renovate it and flip it. And as we were driving by, I noticed this kind of abandoned looking storage facility. And I just assumed that no one was using it. It was completely abandoned, but apparently it was active. And contacted the owner, threw in an offer on it, and figured, why not? So definitely don't come from a self-storage background, more, I would say, multifamily management. And the self-storage kind of just happened by accident. Right at the beginning of COVID is when we closed on that. I think it was January of 2020. And then COVID hit, I think it was March or April. And had no clue about anything with the business.
And so you just from scratch, just picked it up and started to get in the weeds. Did you hire a management company? Did you how'd that take over? You don't know anything.
Basically had no idea what we were doing in the beginning. The storage facility had a house on it. So my original thought was, okay, well, we'll put a manager in there to run this, small storage facility with 66 units, and really kind of just figured it out as we went. We're a family owned and operated company. So, it's me, my wife, and my dad helps, and also my father-in-law. And we just kind of figured it out as we went. And that's really how I've done everything in real estate. I mean, I've not been one to get caught up in reading a bunch of books or, going to conferences or that type of thing. I think the best way to do anything, not only in real estate, just anything, is just to jump in and figure it out as you go.
I talk about that a lot because when we started, that stuff didn't exist. There weren't books on it. There weren't podcasts, social media. There was education, nothing. And I talk about how I wish, when I got started, there would have been so much more. But at the same time, that was a huge gift to me because I didn't know what I didn't know. So I literally just, we'll do it. And so it was me and my partners figuring everything out. It was every time something went wrong, we had no idea. We had to build a policy and procedure.
Yeah.
It was really slow because lots of times we wouldn't even see the effects of bad decisions for a year later or more, right? And all of a sudden it was like, oh, we shouldn't have done that. It's now fall. We have less occupancy and we did this in the spring or whatever that may be. But at the end of the day, we kept buying and we kept doing it because we were just learning.
Yeah.
And so I like that a lot because I think people will confuse the education piece to the doing. And I tell people, I'm like, the education piece is to assist you while you're doing it.
Absolutely.
It is not only not to replace it.
Yeah.
It is not a substitute for it. It is not going to allow you to do it. There is a baseline of understanding you need, and that's really important. You obviously knew real estate. So you obviously understood debt, you understood tenants, you understood looking at laws, things like that. That's different than somebody going, I don't know anything about, I've never even been working as that, I'm just going to go gamble, or that's not what we're talking about, right? There is a baseline of understanding that everybody needs to understand, and two, though, those things, we would reach out to professionals, attorneys, CPAs, right? We'd gather those things and we'd learn as we go.
Yeah.
So there's a baseline, though, of understanding. Outside that, it's only marginally better the more information you know. So even with us and our groups or inner circles, it's people are doing, and then we're figuring it out as we go. I am still today.
Yeah.
Because markets change, values change, assets change, and customers change. So that's actually a process that never ends. I love that. And I think it's really, really important.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that real estate tends to be one of those industries that people kind of really get caught up in. I need to get my real estate license to be an investor. You don't need a license to invest in real estate. And people just kind of get up or get so focused in compartmentalizing the procedure of how to get started. And the best way to do it is literally jump in, get your feet wet and figure it out as you go. And that's literally how I've done everything. If you would have told me 5 years ago that I would have been doing self-storage and basically renting out boxes to people, I would have said that's a boring business. And it's not the most exciting business, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But you know what? Those make the best businesses.
Exactly. Now, how do you view it today? Are you doing all those different things? Is storage your main thing? Like, how do you divide that up now?
So I'm still doing a little bit of everything. Right now, we've got apartments. We still have a portfolio of single family houses, which I kind of did it backwards. I was in commercial real estate in Detroit. I sold all the commercial real estate and then went to houses. But you know what? The opportunity was there, and we bought them for cheap at auction. And basically over the past several years, we've been selling them off, little by little, and using it as seed capital to continue growing with the apartments and also self-storage. And another thing I really focused on in my 20s was this whole idea of passive income and financial independence and retiring early. And I really hyper focused on all of the operations and policies and procedures to have everything run super smooth to achieve that. And like I mentioned earlier, a few years ago, after we had the self-storage in the apartments, I'm like, it's time to kick up my feet and relax. Let's go, get a place in Florida. We'll have a place in Michigan and be able to go to the beach every day and just relax. And to be honest, I was down there for 3 years. I went out of my mind for 2 years.
Yep.
And then the third year I started traveling back to Michigan. It started once a month, and then it was once every 2 weeks. And it's like, I'm not wired that way where I can just sit back and relax. And again, I think what appeals to a lot of people getting into real estate, maybe self-storage, it's this passive income stream. And I think that once you actually achieve that, you don't want it, at least in my case.
Technology is the name of the game, and how you operate your facility and the efficiency at which you can operate will depend on the technology you use. Your property management system, what it allows you to do, and what you have access will determine the outcome of how that facility performs. That's why we go with Tenant Inc. with their product Hummingbird, because they are the best in class when dealing with automation, when dealing with move-ins, customer acquisition process, improving my online acquisition process. They are bar none the best. So if you are looking to automate your facility or operate it in a best in class way, make sure you guys are looking at Tenant Inc. and their product Hummingbird. The link is in the description.
It's funny, I say this a lot, but I'm like, people that really are out, they're reading education, stuff like that about financial freedom. I'm like, you'll never get it because you're so focused on doing nothing.
Yeah.
That's the focus. You're only going to do something to do nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not how it works. And two, they vastly underestimate the work and time that it takes. And so if you're only doing it to do nothing, when you have to do all of this work and all this time, I'm like, they end up quitting, right? Where it's, like you said, I focused on policies, procedures, systems, right? That should be the focus. The financial freedom comes after all of that.
Absolutely.
But you got to build, you got to do all this stuff, and it's going to be hard. And then two, not only that, the goal is a mirage.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing, if you look, even when I was in my young 20s, everybody was like, oh, $50,000 fixed income and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could just get $5,000 a month, I'll go retire and travel the world and be done. Today, those people, literally 10 years later, they had to go get a job.
Yeah.
The $5,000 didn't cut it. They couldn't live anymore. And because they had basically a fixed income, it didn't work. And so that whole time then, guess what happened? They weren't doing things. Then all of a sudden they lost all this momentum, everything else, but their money wasn't building. It wasn't growing with them. So they didn't have financial freedom. Not that that's bad, obviously. Of course not. That's amazing. That's what you want. But the point being is because the goal, actually what you thought or the mirage, right? It's the economy, everything doesn't work like that. And so when they set it up wrong, so you build for an outcome that is not actually the outcome you want, meaning that financial freedom is very different to different people, first of all. Does that mean sitting at home doing nothing, just watching Netflix, right? Because then maybe you could just say, I need a roof, I need basic food and a Netflix, and then I can sit and do nothing. Or is financial freedom like high income replacement? What is that, $60,000, $100,000, right? Or is financial freedom meaning I can do whatever I want? So all of a sudden, it's all of these weird things, but the end goal tends to be around not what you're building and not what you're doing. And so it's so easy to say this isn't worth it or get distracted. And I find that that's not a very good motivator. And so I look at it that most people, they think they want something like you just said, only to find out they don't. I'm like you. I found out I do want to work. I want to have purpose. I want to build. I want to grow.
Yeah.
And when you're young, you're working and you're doing all these things and you have responsibilities and you have bills, and that weighs on you because you've never had them before. When I was 25, I had 2 kids. I was married. I was working beyond full time. I was working like 2 different jobs trying to build a business. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why don't I just get $5,000, $6,000 a month and end it? Because it was so overwhelming. Today, no, I don't know, 9 companies that I own, run. I'm building 2 more. I have 4 kids. And it's not nearly the pressure or anything that it used to be. I'm not even close, nowhere near it. And it's only because that was new, meaning that we change, right? And we see things differently. And most people, though, I'd argue, just what you said, they don't want to do nothing. In fact, it's the opposite.
I think they do.
They think they do. You're exactly right. They want purpose, though. Doing nothing gets boring really fast, as you know, and it's also hollow.
Yeah.
Like your self-worth and value goes down because you're just like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not building. I'm not growing. Even if you're just like, I'm empty. I find that to be almost universally true.
Absolutely. It's like the shiny object syndrome. I mean, and that's what it was for me. I mean, I busted my butt, made a lot of sacrifices and a lot of investments throughout my 20s. And the whole idea was, get a place in Florida and just relax. And, that was fun for probably the first 3 to 6 months. And then, it gets boring really quick. And, from the surface, it sounds great, to be in your 30s and be able to have a place in Florida and in Michigan and come back to Michigan for the summers and have a bunch of flexibility to travel. But exactly what you said, you have to have, your sense of purpose. And for me, constantly growing and having a challenge is where I'm my happiest. So I'm coming out of about a 3-year period where I tell people that, it was kind of a sabbatical for me, but now coming back to Michigan, we actually closed on the sale of our place in Florida last week. We rode out a few hurricanes in Florida, which was just kind of the icing on the cake too, to get out of there. The Midwest is boring. The weather's, not always the best, but it's consistent. And, from an investment standpoint, you can't beat Midwest properties as far as your returns.
Especially starting out. I tell everyone this. If you're a starting out investor and you're trying to make it and you are in places like California, or frankly, even places like where I live, Idaho, where, our prices went so sky high, they were so disproportionate income. You not only can't break in, but we don't offer things like cash flow. Mm-hmm. When you're starting a business, cash flow or investing, which is the same thing to me, but cash flow is king when you're starting out. It's everything.
Yeah.
And so you just can't get ahead. You can't grow. Now, when you have lots of money and you can build and focus on bigger things like equity, those things matter. But so many people, they should do the hard thing, what they view as hard, and that's leave either a sunny or this really rich place stuff to go, which my wife's from the Midwest, right? I married a Kansas girl, and I am in the Midwest. I'm in Oklahoma. I'm in Missouri, Kansas. I love the Midwest. It's amazing actually how awesome these cities are, mm-hmm. and how beautiful they are. and how affordable they are and the culture, everything else. And so moving somewhere where you can get an edge or get a start, that's a hack so much of America is missing.
Absolutely. And, even the short time that I was down in Florida, I spent a lot of time, hoping to buy a self-storage facility in Florida. And, I could never make the numbers work. I mean, the real opportunity, at least from my personal experiences in the Midwest, and like you said, focusing on the cash flow. Without cash flow, you can't build a business. And the fact is that a lot of the properties that are trading in Florida, people are not looking for cash flow. There are a lot of retirees just looking to park capital.
I want to talk more about that. Talk to me about the investing part, and then I want to get on to the storage and operation. But like the capital, how do you source it, or how do you get it? Is it from your own investments in houses, or you're doing velocity of money and you're upping your capital and buying, or are you taking investors? How are you going about that part?
So it's all my own capital. I'm confident if I would have taken outside capital, I could have grown a lot quicker than I have. But for me, that type of responsibility doesn't really intrigue me. I've had partners in the past, especially when I was in Detroit. I've had some good partnerships and I've had some bad ones. And, to be honest, I prefer to keep it in the family. My thought is, who can you trust more than family? So
that's how we were too. 15 years, it was just me, my father, and brother-in-law. It wasn't anybody else. It was our own money, our own time, our own effort, our own work.
Yeah.
It was only till after that that we took capital. So I completely understand that. Two, though, that also defined our strategy as I think with you. You had limited capital, so you went to places where you could obviously buy and afford and do more. And that's where we did too. We went to extraordinarily rural, like really rural, intermountain, northwest cities. You're talking about cities that have 5,000 people, or less, right? And so the properties were not operated well, and they didn't cost a lot. It was a cash flow opportunity, right? And we built from there. And I think that comes down to another thing where if you're starting out, you're not using investor money, you do need to go to where you can build it. Because as you know, velocity of money. You were talking about selling properties, going and buying, because you need that capital to compound. That's a really important thing. How are you doing that today? Are you holding properties? The commercial ones, the ones you're buying now. Is your plan to hold, to sell? You said you bought like small houses or multifamily, different things. Are you actively selling? How's that work?
So as of right now, I'm kind of on a strategy to get rid of all the houses. The houses were bought primarily between like 2017 to 2019. We bought them for super cheap at tax auctions and different other, real estate auctions. And as the market has gone up, so have the value, obviously, of the houses. But as the economy has been shifting and changing, affordable housing becomes more challenging, and that includes apartments. And it's just, it's part of the cycle, and it's a good time to exit. And as we've been selling off those houses, we've been buying other multifamily and then also self-storage.
Okay. I love it. Talk to me about, now I want to know how you're doing it. How are you operating these? How are you running? Like you have 4 properties. Are they close to each other? Like, walk me through the mechanics of this. That's fascinating to me. What's the size of the properties? And, you started out not knowing anything. Did you get help? Or, how were you evicting, cleaning out units? Like, was it you? Like, how'd that work?
So let me talk about the first one. The first property that I kind of bought, the self-storage property that I bought by accident. Like I mentioned, I thought it was abandoned when I first drove by it. But about a month later, I guess the gentleman that owned it passed away, and a real estate broker listed it and reached out to me, walked through it. It was in complete disrepair. I think that anyone, including a seasoned self-storage investor, would have passed on that property. I probably wouldn't have done it again. On the property, like I mentioned before, there was a house and then also a hall that was operated by the Eagles at like kind of a VFW hall. The middle building, it was a pole-built building, and they didn't dig the footings deep enough, so it was sagging and just a complete mess. The doors were all rusted. About half the facility was filled. Mind you, it was only 66 units at the time. So, I courted a couple local banks. One of the banks told me that I was nuts and basically the property needed to be bulldozed. And then met another banker that for some reason he gave me a chance on the property, and they funded the purchase of it, and then also about $150,000 renovation loan on it. So just kind of took it one step at a time. We went in there and replaced a bunch of the doors. The middle building, we actually hired a contractor that jacked the building up, put it on stilts, and then dug down 48 inches to re-pour the footings, and then kind of inch the building back down. In reality, the building probably should have just been torn down, but at the time, that's what we decided to do. The hall and the house, we actually ended up converting into climate control storage, which is pretty funny and deceiving from the outside. You pull up to the storage facility and it looks like a house, but you walk in and it's a full climate controlled storage building with like 18 climate control units in there. That was kind of the first phase, was to stabilize the property. And this storage facility is in the city limits of this small rural town. The property taxes are pretty high. Again, when I first bought it, I put together plans to expand it, but realized that the taxation could, basically kill most of the cash flow. So the second year, I was driving down another rural road, and I noticed these Amish storage buildings. And I contacted the Amish guy, met him over there. I'm like, can you chop these up into, instead of doing one storage shed, can you chop them up into storage units? And kind of an experiment, but we ended up doing about 6,000 square feet of these portable storage buildings that are sitting right on top of crushed limestone. And it was kind of an interesting workaround from a taxation perspective, but also gives us flexibility if, later on that we do decide to expand the property.
Walk me through those portables. How have you liked those? How did the price compare in that market? Every market's obviously different, but in that market, was there a difference in rent you could get? How did you feel about that? Did they fill up quick? I know a lot of people have looked at those and considered it. I have them. I use them at some of my sites. What was your experience with that?
So I was really careful with the portables. I spent a lot of time looking into them. I looked at getting some from Miller Buildings and then also Trektie, and kind of decided against them because they look like portable storage buildings to me. And they weren't really cost effective in this case. So again, the Amish were able to build them for about $35 a square foot. And at the time, I think this was 2021, I could have in reality built ground up new buildings, material and labor for probably $14 or $15 a square foot. But again, it was more than just throwing the buildings up. I was trying to kind of work around the taxation issue.
We did that, not so much for the taxation, but the legality. So because you have to ask for permits and stuff. And I see a lot of people use it. So that's why we would do it a lot. Or two, it's great if you have land leases.
Exactly.
Because you don't own the ground. So those two, but.
Yeah. And if to answer your question, the rates that we've been able to achieve on those. So most of the units are 8 by 12 units, which are essentially a 10 by 10. And we've, without any issue, have been able to rent those at the same rate that we rent a 10 by 10. And I think it's probably market specific. I mean, it's just the type of customer that we attract, that they don't care if it's, a ground up building or if it's a portable storage shed. And again, being selective with these portables, I wanted to have them look like buildings. So, we basically color match the roof and the siding to match the existing storage buildings. And if you drive through the storage facility, you may not even notice that it's a portable storage building.
Right now, financing for real estate is really hard, even for self-storage. The markets are very challenging. Live Oak Bank is a specialist in financing for self-storage, including SBA loans. They are one of the leaders in financing all sorts of deals and deal size. We trust Live Oak Bank for their specialty in self-storage, their unique approach, and how they help their customers go through the process so there's no surprises. That in itself is a testament to their exceptional service and support. So whether you're looking to acquire, build, or expand a storage facility, Live Oak Bank has to be number one on your list to call. Click the link below right now so you can experience the difference that a dedicated self-storage partner can really make.
What was the percentage difference, portable to non?
So this property was about originally 12,000 square feet, and then we added about 6,000 square feet of portable. So, I mean, the 6,000 square feet of portable is pretty significant, in my opinion.
Same type of units? Like, did you have 10 by 10s and added more 10 by 10s? So you like a good comparison?
So at this property, about 50% of our unit mix is basically either the 8 by 12 or 10 by 10. But what's really unique about this market is there's a local ordinance in the city that doesn't allow homeowners to build garages because all the setback requirements in the small town, they don't permit any new construction of new garages for homeowners. So there's a huge shortage of garage space and storage in this town. So it's really funky, but it works.
That's awesome. Now, was that your first one, you say?
That was the first one.
So the first one you put portables on. Okay,
Yeah.
Now walk me through the three others. So after you get this done, how did the next one go about it? Because now you have experience.
Yeah.
So now you've seen things. You got operations, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of the operations and the systems and everything are easily can translate into storage from multifamily. And it's almost, to me, it was a no-brainer and easier. Mm-hmm. But, after I started seeing self-storage is kind of interesting, and, it was kind of an experiment, and realized that it's working. And mind you, this is like during COVID time, I'm going to try and buy some more of these. So I literally spent about 2 weeks driving around the entire state of Michigan, all these small towns, making cold calls. And the next one that I was able to get, I put under contract in, I think it was March of 21. And then I put the other one that was coincidentally 4 miles away under contract in April. So kind of have back-to-back closings on those. The second one was also a challenge. It was built in the 80s, block construction with flat TPO roofs. The woman that owned them basically did nothing for 30 years. She had got the storage property through a divorce and really hated running it and did a horrible job. And she admittedly told me that. She's like, please, I hate this property, buy it from me. So was able to buy it at a good price. And then later that summer, we had to replace, I think it was 45 or 47 lintels above all the doors, which was an interesting project. They basically had to support all the beams in the interior of the units, and then pull out the lintels and then put the new lintels back in. We also had to put on a new roof there. That storage facility, I think, was about 90 units when we first bought it. All the doors were original and horrible. So we ended up replacing all of the doors with the track right doors, which was another challenge with the occupied units. And
a lot of people don't think about that. There's laws, though, around you just can't look at people's stuff. Like you just can't go open things up. That's not how it works. There's regulations and laws, what we can do, how we can do it. That's actually probably one of the more difficult things about storage, actually. Yeah. Because some of those people you can't even contact.
Yeah. And I've always been kind of a risk taker, and I've pushed the envelope. So, I mean, I'm not going to lie. There's, a few units that we did cut the locks off and we replaced the door, and they showed up, 6 months or even a year later with a new combination lock on it. Hey, what happened to my storage unit? Because a lot of times, as you know, it's hard to make contact with a lot of these customers.
Oh, sometimes it's like impossible. Like they give either fake information because you're buying it from another owner who had paper records or something like that. Very difficult.
Yeah. So we had to take some risk with that, but it took us about a year and a half, 2 years to turn that property around. And then to kind of rewind and look at the portables that I did at the first storage facility, I was like, one of these driveways is about 45 feet wide. And, when I first bought it, the plan was not to expand it. It was only on a 1.14 acre small site, but we were able to put a row of about 200 lineal feet of these 8 by 12 units. and essentially added about 25 units along the fence line. With the Amish construction, it looks very cohesive, and it looks like one continuous building, but it's actually 5 different buildings that are about 40 feet long by 12 feet wide. And we were still able to keep a nice drive aisle. So that was kind of a bonus. And, another example of why I think these portables and, small sites are weird configurations. They add to your bottom line and are a good solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, okay, tell me the difference between a portfolio of 4 and running 1, particularly on operations. Like, how do you look at that differently, or how do you have to approach that differently? Because as you're scaling, right, you could theoretically, you buy a storage facility or build one in your town and you could just run down and do everything.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden you start to get 4 in different cities, everything else. What does that look like as you're buying another one? And how do you think about adding that in?
I think you have to revert to having good systems and processes. And especially, all of our sites are remotely managed. We have a maintenance guy at each one that lives there locally. So I always have someone that's right around the corner that can go there and sweep out the units or deal with any damage issues or customer issues. And I think having a reliable person that you can trust to do that makes it a lot easier. And especially, having the 2 that are right by each other are fenced and gated. So occasionally you'll have gate problems. I had someone, I think last year, get trapped inside of the storage facility and didn't answer my phone for about 3 minutes. And she called the fire department and the police department and was having a panic attack. But, our maintenance man was able to run over there and get it open. And you can't do that if you're 2 hours away. And I live, about 2 hours away from these facilities.
That on the ground presence is very important.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. It's still real estate.
Yeah.
I see this and I hear people talking about it. Like, I don't even be there. I'm like, well, hold on. Technology is great. Automation is very important. We do it. Like, we are big on full hardware, software. We want all our tenants coming in without human contact. Like, that's like a goal, right?
Absolutely.
But it is still real estate. It is not something that you can forget about or not have continual touch points on, right? That is what gets you in big trouble really quickly in real estate.
Yeah. And see, I think that, maybe, my advantage is that's kind of how I got into real estate, working for, a large management company.
Yeah.
The customer comes first, and you bend over backwards. When they call, you get back to them right away. You're super responsive, regardless of what the issue is. And so that was kind of ingrained in me early on. And I've really have taken that same approach with self-storage customers. And, I've been hyper focused on the customer experience, which I think a lot of operators lose track of that.
Yes.
All the small details add up to a huge impact. And if you're really putting yourself in the customer's shoes and understanding they don't know the storage business, and they a lot of times maybe have never rented a storage unit before, and having the systems in place that make it very easy for a customer to rent, get access, and manage their account, I think is critical. And understanding who your customer is too. The 2 storage facilities that we have essentially in the same town, they're 2 neighboring towns, but 4 miles away. There's quite a bit of storage. We had a feasibility study done. Don't quote me on this, but I think it was 16 or 17. And, from the feasibility study, it said the market was ultra saturated. So there's a ton of storage in this area, which requires us to be more competitive, hyper responsive, and do things that separate us from the competitors. And some of our competitors use call centers, which is great in theory as an operator. You just outsource the phone calls to a call center. But in the small towns that we're in, our customers like to pick up the phone and they like to talk to an owner or manager, not someone that's sitting in California or overseas, or they want to talk to the person that is real.
Yep.
So I think that's been a huge advantage for us, being family owned and operated. Like, in these small rural areas, they appreciate that.
I say this a lot, but it is really true. There's so many advantages when you're starting out. And I'm saying this because I know the advantages, frankly, that we kind of lost. And these advantages are really big. Like if I'm buying a small turnaround facility, I know 9 times out of 10, I can actually generate a bigger return on my money than if I'm buying a bigger one, because the bigger one is more institutionalized. They're being ran better because they're more expensive, everything else. There's not as much yield I can get. The problem is then people are like, well, why don't you go buy all little ones? I'm like, well, if I'm buying a $20 million facility versus a $2 million one or a $500,000 one.
Yeah.
If I'm buying a $500,000 versus a $20 million one, right? I have to have 30 facilities in the same transaction to get one. It's a capital allocation problem, not a return. So you can't get the return bleeds down because the operations to even buy, close, everything else would just take all that expense out. And then you have the operation standpoint. I have 13,000 doors.
Yeah.
It changes how you can even manage, operate. And so many people forget this, that they think, well, I'm just starting out, I'm small, I don't have any advantages. That is not true at all. I mean, when you're in marketplaces and you're dealing with facilities under $1 million, you do not have people like me. They're not going after those properties.
Yeah.
So you actually have more opportunity to buy today.
Absolutely.
If you have a firm that is trying to buy 60, 50,000 square feet plus in markets with 100,000 plus people, right? Which is almost all capital. That's even small for most capital, really small.
Yeah.
Versus somebody that's like, I can buy in $200,000 facilities in cities that have 5,000 people. The amount of opportunities that they have is overwhelmingly more.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I see a lot of parallels with where self-storage is evolving compared to what has happened with multifamily in the past 15 or 20 years. I remember, working for one of the largest multifamily operators in the country. They were very hyper-focused on, 200 to 500 unit apartment communities. And that's where their focus was. And those are big communities.
Monetarily speaking, what does it cost to buy a 400 unit apartment in a decent city?
In Michigan, I mean, you're 20, 30, 40 million plus, depending on the market.
Yeah, it's not like 200 units in storage, everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. But what happened in multifamily is you had these large operators that were focusing on these large apartment communities. But as those got gobbled up and the market consolidated, a lot of these bigger apartment operators, they started buying the smaller ones.
Yep.
And I think that is actually what is most likely going to happen in self-storage. I mean, kind of my thought is, and my theory is, if the town has a Dollar General, I'll buy their, a self-storage facility there. Because if Dollar General can have a profitable business there, then
you can.
A self-storage operator can. And I think that at some point, it may not be in 5 years or 10 years, but it may be 15 or 20. I think a lot of these larger REITs and institutional self-storage operators are going to be wanting to get more boutique and expand their footprint and buy some of these smaller storage facilities. And we've seen that a little bit in Michigan, in the neighboring city, which actually has a smaller population than what we have. A regional self-storage company with over 200 locations around the U.S. bought in that city, in a small facility that was, I think 32,000 square feet.
The roll-up model in self-storage is all about small today. It is no longer about, I believe, second-tier big storage facilities. Mm-hmm. That was the roll-up model when I started.
Absolutely.
If you could buy big facilities in second-tier markets, no REITs, no public companies were there. You could buy 10 of those and you could sell them to a REIT when you were buying it at a 7 or an 8 cap, and you could sell it to them then 5 years later at a portfolio value at like a 5 cap, and you made tons of money.
Yeah.
The money moving in, it won't be economic for them to buy these little facilities like at hundreds at a top. So what they're going to do is they're going to look for guys like you and others that say, I have 5 facilities.
Yeah.
I have 3 or I have 10. And then they're going to pay out premium to get 10 at once.
I absolutely agree with that.
And that's where a huge move is going to happen over the next 10 years.
And really, again, me coming off my 3-year sabbatical, I'm getting, back into Michigan. And that's really what my goal is to build a small portfolio of these kind of more rural storage facilities. And maximize the space, expand them as needed. And the thought is, 5, 10, 15 years from now, my exit strategy will put them together as a portfolio and sell it to institutional buyer.
I love it, dude. I think you're right on the money.
And then speaking of building, so with these portable storage buildings that I did, they worked out great and it was the right application for the site. But the third storage facility that I bought sat on about 2.5 acres and there was quite a bit of room there. So we did, this past year, we added about 11,000 square feet of, ground up conventional storage there. We opened the doors on the new units July 1st weekend. And even in this kind of weird market that we're in right now, we're sitting at 83% occupancy.
Yeah.
So we've been able to fill about 30% since July. And we've seen a major slowdown. It feels like the past year and a half, the market has just become really stagnant with self-storage, at least in the markets that we're in. So I've been very happy that we've been able to make that much progress.
I love it. I think it's awesome. Exciting to see what you do. This is a model that I think is, if we looked at everybody we're talking to, 80% of the listeners probably fit more into this model. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us what you're doing, your journey. If people want to learn more about you, dude, or reach out to you, where can we send people?
Best way to contact me is probably through email. My email is derek@4731group.com. And Derek is spelled DEREK at 4731group, as in groupofpeople.com.
Awesome. Well, dude, thanks for the time. Appreciate it, man. And I look forward to seeing your success and watching you go, dude. It's exciting.
Yeah, appreciate it, AJ.